That's an
Nigel and Deepan, I am from agriculture background, but on the 21st of December, me and my daughter, she is a 7th grader, but we were very interested to see the Jupiter and Saturn.
Ah, yes.
Merging together. But
right.
18th, 19th, I think 19th and 20th, we see them close to each other. But on 21st, the sky was very cloudy. We missed it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Yes.
But that's okay. 20th. Actually, I actually have been observing it since starting of the last year, which is 2020, February, all the way down as it came closer and closer and closer and up to 21st, our sky was very good. And then 22nd, it became cloudy. So it was good. I have some good pictures of it, good photos up close.
Yeah. Sir, I think Mohammed Irfan is here.
Oh, yes, I see Mr. Irfan. Welcome, Mr. Irfan.
Sure.
I think we talked in the morning also.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
We just exchanged seats.
So Irfan, I stuck around. Actually, turns out in the morning I got up at 4 just to see your talk. Your chairship, because you took over from Farida Akhtar, who was not there. And then, and then Farooq Zaman spoke the first one. So what happened is that I saw you somewhere today, but I don't know when. So anyway, the reason I stuck around is that I want to introduce you Nigel Hughes, who is the second speaker, and he's already present. He's my neighbor and good friend for the last 25 years. And he's from UC Riverside. He's a professor there. And he knows both Bangladesh and West Bengal. Nigel was in Shantiniketan for 1 year learning Bengali in 1980s, mid-1980s.
Wow.
So
আমি একটু জানি এখন আমার বাংলা ক্লান্ত
So Nigel, are you presenting in Bangla today?
No, I was not thinking. I'm afraid my Bengali is far too yes. I can good in tea shops, but that's about it. আমি কিন্তু বৈজ্ঞানিকের জিনিস একটু কঠিন আমার জন্য মনে হয়।
Actually, Nigel রবীন্দ্রসঙ্গীত জানে কয়েকটা।
সেটাই জিজ্ঞেস করছিলাম, রবীন্দ্রসঙ্গীত। হ্যাঁ।
Right.
You learned some Tagore songs, right?
Yeah, Shantiniketan was the best place to learn.
Yeah, beautiful place. Yeah, lovely. Yeah. Except for now, of course, they are building walls everywhere, and I don't know whether you've seen the news in Birbhum, but the terrible government in India is building huge walls around Shantiniketan and around the ashram. So very bad news.
I see Mr. Ataur Rahman also joined with us. Mr. Ataur Rahman is the co-chair here. Hello, Mr. Ataur Rahman. I'm Farooq Zaman.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. Yes, this is Ataur Rahman, and very nice meeting you this morning. Hope you all are well.
Yep. I believe
looks like there are more chairs and co-chairs than presenters. Is that so?
That's true.
Right.
Yeah, I see for every session, 5 presenter and 5 others people behind the camera. So it means 7 sessions, 70 people are involved.
Well, Irfan knows actually how much he went behind the scene, right?
Right.
আচ্ছা, আপনি কি নীলু আপা?
হোস্ট তোমার স্লাইড চেঞ্জ হচ্ছে না।
আসসালামু
স্লাইড চেঞ্জ হচ্ছে না।
I have to change. দেখি তো আমি কি রিমোট কিছুতে আছি। আমি নীলু আপা।
হ্যাঁ, কথাই তো শুনলাম, কামরুল ভাইয়ের কাছে দেখা হয়নি ওইদিন, কথা হইলো আপনার সাথে অনেক।
হ্যাঁ, আচ্ছা, আপনি হচ্ছেন মোহাম্মদ ইরফান।
হ্যাঁ, ইরফান আমার নাম আপা। হ্যাঁ,
সেই ভালো দেখা হলো। আমি আপনার একটা সেশন দেখলাম কালকেই, তো আমাদের কালকে।
আচ্ছা,
তখন
সেশন আমার গভীর সকালে হয়েছে, কাজেই আবছা আবছা মনে আছে ভোর 4টার
Defender
সময়
round the clock. He's not sleeping.
না আমি এই তো নীলু আপার সঙ্গে একটু আগে কথা হলো আমি এখানেই বসেছিলাম ফোনে উনি
না না আমার হচ্ছে সমস্যা কারণ আমি আমেরিকান প্রোগ্রামগুলো যখন দেখি তখন আমার রাত 1টা 2টা বাজে এবং আমি খুব সবসময় 11টার মধ্যে ঘুমাই এই যে আমার জন্য মানে খুবই কষ্ট জেগে থাকা যার জন্য দিনের বেলা সেটা ক্রমশ টানতে থাকে যে আমি ঘুমাচ্ছি ফরচুনেটলি অস্ট্রেলিয়াতে আমাদের ছুটি প্রায় 10 দিনের ক্রিসমাসের সময় সেই জন্য আমার নেক্সট অনেক ছুটি আছে আনটিল 4th of January আমি বিভিন্ন অফিস হোম ওয়ার্কিং ফ্রম হোম মাঝখানে 2 ঘন্টার জন্য কিন্তু অফিসিয়ালি আমরা কাজ শুরু করবো 4th January থেকে অস্ট্রেলিয়া এটা আমেরিকা না খুব ভালো আমাদের ছুটি
নীলু আপা আপনার চেয়ারশিপ হচ্ছে ও সেশন হুইচ ইজ কালকে না মানে
আমার আজকে রাত 8টায়
আপনার আজকে হ্যাঁ ওটা ঠিক মাথায় রাখতে হবে আর কি সো অলরেডি একটা ওনার মিস হয়েছে কোচের ঠিকমতো সময় যায়নি এটা ইরফান
চেয়ার ছিলাম আমি সেটা
চেয়ার ছিলেন
আমারও বলতেন আমি চেয়ার নিয়ে হাজির থাকতাম
আরে টেবিলই থাকে না এই তো চেয়ার থাকবে
আজকে ওই হিলাল ভাইয়ের মায়ের দোয়া পড়ানো হইলো জুমে একটু আগে
হ্যাঁ আলোচনা সভা ছিল
হ্যাঁ রাশিদা আপা ছিল
রাশিদা ছিল না
রাশিদা আপা
মোহন ছিল আমি ছিলাম সেখানে
ও তাই নাকি
হ্যাঁ আমি এই জন্য আমি জানি
ছিল
ওটা অরেঞ্জ করেছিল মাহবুব-জামান উনি অরেঞ্জ করে মানে সবাই মাহমুদা খালিদা শাহিদা রাশিদা তো বাইরে কোথায় ছিল মোহন ছিল প্রোগ্রামে সালাউদ্দিন ভাই ছিল এটাই
ফারুক ভাইয়ের সময় নিয়ে নিচ্ছি
no problem so we had just 3 minutes so can we just start now if everybody is okay
is it live already
yes can I ask our co-host Mr. Sadman like whether it is live on Facebook or
probably not yet because we cannot see any mark.
I can't hear you. The sound is breaking.
Noise. There is a noise.
Okay, so but can we start now our session, like just introduction class and something?
না এটা ভালো আইডিয়া আমার মনে হয় ইন্ট্রোডাকশনটা সময়টা বাঁচে হ্যাঁ ফারুক ভাই
আচ্ছা তাহলে আমরা কি ইন্ট্রোডাকশনটা আমরা করেই ফেলি okay so let's start so here I am Farooq Zaman I'm honored to be the chair of this session today and then just a little bit about me like I'm working as an entomologist at Cornell University Agricultural Extension. Basically, my background is agriculture, so I will be a novice for some of the talk today. So I'll be learning also. So, and we have 5 excellent speakers today. So let me read their name, and then all the speakers will introduce them at the beginning of the presentation within very short time, maybe 30 seconds to a minute. So today we have Mr. Irfan Mahmood as first speaker, Mr. Nigel Hughes as the second speaker, and then Jinat Hussain as the third speaker, and Jahidul Islam as the fourth speaker. And I think I don't have that name, Mr. Fatima. Can I ask you the name, Mr. Sadman? What is the 5th name? That I don't have in my paper list. Could you please read the name?
I can read the name if you want. It's Nushat Fatima and Dr. Muhammad Ghulam Murtaza.
Nushat Fatima. Okay, so Ms. Nushat Fatima is the 5th speaker today. So we have 12 minutes for each talk. So I would request everybody to finish within 12 minutes. And then there is 3 minutes for question. So how about if we keep all the questions saved and then we'll answer at the end of the presentation? Is that good? Or you'd like to, I'm asking to the speakers, you'd like to answer the question within the 3 minutes after your presentation?
Well, I have just one issue. I have to go start another session at hard 1 hour and 30 minutes. So I'm okay with either way you go, just so everybody knows, and I don't mind not facing the questions. They're safe. So,
Okay, so
just so that you know, but it's okay. If you want to do me earlier, that's fine with me.
okay, so maybe like we'll finish your portion. Maybe like we'll see. If you speakers, if you can finish within 12 minutes, then maybe we can take that question and within this 3 minutes we'll answer it. If some people need more time, maybe we'll have to wait at the end of the 50 speakers to answer all the questions. Also, I'll ask the attendee, you can write questions in the chat box also so that some of the speakers can answer you directly from the chat box just by texting. Or you can ask the question at the end of your presentation or after end of the session. So that's how I would like to move forward. So are we ready for our first speaker or should we wait for a couple minutes? Okay, so let me introduce our co-chair here. Mr. Ataur Rahman from BAPA is our co-chair. Here is our organizer, Mr. Humayun Kabir Shumon, and also co-host, Mr. Sadman from Dhaka University. And I don't think that Mr. Obayadur is here. So let me ask Mr. Our co-chair, Mr. Ataur Rahman, would you like to say a couple minutes?
Thank you, Farooq Bhai. Good morning to all distinguished participants once again. This is Ataur Rahman Miton. I'm the member executive committee of BAPA, and therefore I have been nominated. And now, obviously, I'm honored to be the co-chair of this session today. Actually, I work for Hunger Free World, which is a Japanese NGO working in Bangladesh since 2001, and I have been associated with BAPA since then in different capacities. And we do, from the name, you could guess that we do work on the food and agriculture, all these issues. I'm not an agriculturist by education, but I do work for the community people, community farmers, and I do work with the young people particularly, and raising the voices for the right to food. Anyway, and safe food is one of my specialty, you may say. And today we have a session at 12:30 where we will be sharing our ideas on food safety and the environment, how these two issues correlate each other and why these both are important. Anyway, my best regards to all the participants. Regarding the time, I think we should allocate 12 minutes, and 12 minutes include the question and answer sessions if the distinguished participants wants. Because some of us has another schedule. For example, like Irfan, I also have an appointment at, I have to join the next session at 10:30, and I'm a speaker there, so I must be on time. And therefore, I have to leave at 10:30. So it's better that we finish at least 5 minutes early. Thank you so much, Farooq Bhai.
Sure. Okay, so is Mr. Humayun Kabir Shumon is here. Would you like to say a couple sentences? Just to say hi to the audience. Mr. Humayun Kabir Shumon from BAPA. I think. Oh, Shantanu. Okay, so yes, Mr. Shantanu Vishal, if you would like to say anything to the audience. Okay, maybe he was muted. Okay, and then organizer co-host Mr. Sadman, is there any rules or anything you'd like to say, like whether in the morning session, the co-host is actually asking for a couple key points of their presentation in the chat box. So do you would like to take those notes, or you're fine as it is? Oh, okay. So thank you. So let me start. So our first presenter is Mr. Irfan Mahmoud. So with further ado, let me go for his presentation. Okay, so the floor is yours, Mr. Irfan.
Okay, thank you. Let me make sure I have my screen share, okay?
Sure.
Okay, do you guys see my screen?
Yes, it's coming.
Thank you. So while this is loading, this is Muhammad Irfan. I work at University of Denver, Colorado. I've been working with them for about 15 years, almost 15 years now. I work from my home in California. That's one of the reasons it didn't make anything different for me during these trying times. With that, I will go into my presentation. Let me set up the slideshow from the beginning. Okay. So I wanted to look at some emission scenarios. That's the title of my slide there. Let me go to the first slide here. So of course, you all are familiar with this, the rise in the temperature. Starting from the pre-industrial period, you can see how the temperature is rising. This is data collected by Berkeley Earth. And what it shows is change in global average temperature with respect to the 1951-1980 average. There's a good news, actually, a bit of good news in that in this plot. Do you guys see that? So it looks like it's started to come down a tiny bit. Hopefully, it'll continue with all the good things that are happening. And of course, there'll be some impact from the pandemic. As we know, there are a lot of lack of activities, and economic activities is actually helping in terms of the emissions. But of course, it has a lot of other implications. So the reason for this is, of course, also well known to us by now. I didn't start my timer, so I just want to go ahead and start my timer. So this is, again, a plot of global CO2 emissions starting from very early 1751. And as you know, all the global goals, they're set on the basis of 1850 to 1900 basis, which is when temperatures started to rise substantially, just at the onset of the Industrial Revolution. And also, one of the reasons actually they chose this period, 1850 to 1900, is there isn't much good data before this period. So that's what we are seeing. And if we proceed, what we will see is, this is, of course, showing some time trend in the recent times in terms of emission. It's billion tons of carbon. This data is taken from the model that I use. I was talking about Purdy Center, where I've been working for a long time. We have a model called International Futures. One of the capability of the model is data analysis, and I will talk about the model shortly, but for now, let me just show you this one. And I have a question for the audience. Who can guess which country is at the top?
USA or China?
Maybe USA.
How many people think it's USA?
Obviously is.
Okay, this is total emission. And some people think it's USA, some people think it's China. Nobody thinks it's Bangladesh, though, right? How about India?
Right, right.
Where do you think India is?
Could be.
Could be, yes.
Let's see, which is what. Next one is a clap for whoever has said it's China. As you can see, the China has started coming from much below US. And of course, there are a lot of people, a lot of economists.
So, Mr. Irfan, we could not hear you.
Maybe his connection is unstable. Because
back in 98, and after that you can see especially the 2000 to 2015 or so, they were growing really fast and crossing China. That's what, who can guess where Bangladesh is in this plot?
Very low, I see.
Yeah, actually the green one, we are still, the green one at the bottom is Bangladesh. In terms of total emission, we are still much lower. So what we are seeing here is Bangladesh is a there could be climate refugees, and we talked about economic loss, there'll be burden of disease, the tropical diseases will go up. So all these are going to affect us much more than many other countries, or other low-lying countries with a lot of coastal areas like Vanuatu or some other country like Maldives. Those countries will also be affected a lot. So there has been a lot of talks about what can be done, because the situation is very gloomy in terms of the global emissions and the temperature rise. And there are a lot of worries that with the temperature rise in this scale, there could be 3 to 4 degrees by 2100, which would be a disaster. And international talks and treaties have been going on. There is this Conference of Parties agreement, and on the 21st one in Paris, there was an agreement that were reached between 196 parties. So the goal is basically to limit the warming to 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial level. That's the key thing. So it's so this time they have come up with a band of temperature as opposed to a hard guardrail, so that there are a lot of uncertainties. There are a lot of talks about uncertainties in that measurement, and there are so-called denialists who are trying to put skepticism on the science. So they have come up with this range, and to attain that goal, of course, there are two things. One is, of course, there'll be mitigation goals, and there's also change there in as opposed to pledging, the countries has come up with something called NDC, which I'll talk about shortly. But then there also talks about adaptation, because what happens if the steps are not taken and there are raise in temperature, so the countries need to be prepared. So there are talks about adaptation and mitigation. Now, in terms of implementation of these goals, the mitigation targets, as I said, there is this nationally determined contributions. The countries will actually put a document called INDC, Intended Nationally Determined Contributions. That will be updated every 5 years. The first one is supposed to come in 2020. And one other thing, I was talking about how Bangladesh is especially vulnerable. So there was some exceptions on countries like Bangladesh or Vanuatu or Maldives. There's some slack in the kind of pledge that Bangladesh will be making. You can make it in terms of percentage reduction in emission compared to a base case scenario by a certain year, as opposed to specific goals and targets. So based on that, and of course, this is the treaty that was signed. In here, we see all the big emitters. So I want to come to this one where you can see that Bangladesh has actually come up with this goals of pledge of unconditional contribution and conditional contribution, conditional to international support and pledges. And it's either 5% reduction from the 2030 base case or 15% reduction based on conditional and unconditional contributions. So this is the goal set by myself, ourselves, our country, you know. So they say you set the goal yourself so that there is stakeholder is responsible. And this is what it looks like in terms of emission. This is actually in million ton carbon dioxide. I was showing billion ton before. That's why the numbers were that low. And it's showing that 5% and 15%. Now, if you go here, as you can see, the major polluting sectors, major emitting sectors in Bangladesh are power, transport, and industries. And this one actually says which ones need to reduce how much. And most of the pledge in terms of reduction is, of course, in transportation in percentage terms. So what did I do? This is my model, International Future System, developed with someone called Barry Hughes. Another Hughes there. I have been with him for, as I said, almost 20 years now. So this is an integrated model where you have multiple modules. You have economy, we have health, we have education, we have agriculture, energy, production, infrastructure, technology, as you can see. And this is an integrated model in the sense that everything is connected to everything. It's a long-term computer simulation. And for economy, there is a CGE model. For energy, there are this energy efficiency, energy production, reserve and resources, everything is represented. The good thing is things are connected. So if you do something in economy, like if there is growth, you will see more emission. Or depending on what policy you take, you can actually have scenarios. That's one of the things this model allows us to do. You can do scenarios on high growth but lower emissions, and then you can look at the implications. So, and the model is actually available for free up in the web. This is the website. So what I did is, okay, there are a few more slides here about, if you go to the help system, it explains with the flow charts and the equations of what is inside the model. So the model is very transparent. It's all available up in the web, and it's available for anyone to use it for free. There are 186 countries in the model. For some countries, there is a subnational model as well. So what did I do? I actually know that Bangladesh has this high growth target. The country is already a lower middle income country. It wants to turn itself into upper middle income country. But of course, as you have heard Anu Muhammad in the talk, in the opening session, we cannot have high growth and high emission. Usually what happens is there is this thing called environmental Kuznets curve. Countries use polluting as they grow before they get more efficient, then it starts, so it's an inverted U. So after some time, it starts coming down.
You have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you for the reminder, Mr. Chairman. So what I want to see is what happens if it keeps on growing, at the base rate. It's actually growing very fast these days. I mean, before the pandemic, it was growing at the rate of 6 to 8%. And there will, of course, be a hit, as IMF and World Bank has predicted, and there will be some rebound. So all of these are actually inbuilt in the model. What I did is I looked at the base case, and then I looked at high growth scenarios so that the country's per capita income reaches some, to countries like Indonesia or Sri Lanka, or maybe Guatemala and Latin America. These are the countries in the lower tier of the upper middle income countries. So these are the classifications that World Bank made: low income, lower middle income, upper middle income, and high income. So to do that, and this is China, of course, as you know, you cannot continue to grow at that high rate for a long time. So scenario will also do the same. After growing high for some time, it has to come down. And these are my growth scenarios. As you can see, the GDP per capita is growing in the model, as opposed, because of the growth assumptions that I made in my scenarios. And as a result, the energy demand is growing and the carbon emission is growing because we are growing inefficiently, or at least at the base efficiency. So I did more scenarios where now I have 2 things to attain those goals. One is you get more energy, you can get more energy efficient, and then also you can get, change your energy mix towards renewables. As you guys, as most of you know, Bangladesh uses a lot of fossil fuels at this point, but they're mostly imported. There is some gas in the country, but bulk of the energy is imported. And the country is even importing coal to generate electricity. There were some talks in other sessions today. So I looked at both changing the energy mix and getting more efficient, both on the consumption and the supply side. And as you can see here, based on what you are doing, if you are going more renewable, emission goes down. This one shows actually four scenarios where you have.
Someone's microphone is on. Could you please turn this off?
So this one shows base growth. The red one is the high growth, lot of emission, and the purple one is high growth with renewables, and the green one is actually high growth renewables and low energy intensity, meaning high efficiency. Those are the changes that Bangladesh can make if they follow a low carbon society. Of course, I didn't talk about the details of what needs to be done in terms of taking this policy. Also, this is very much a work in progress. My next steps would be looking at the costs and benefits, what's happening to the GDP per capita, what's happening to the employment, which we represent in the model, and what are the costs of going into that path. That is it for today. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Irfan. Now I'd like to make the floor open for question. Is there any question for Mr. Irfan?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
This is Dipen. So Irfan, are we? So was that the pledge was done in the? Was that the Paris Climate Accord? The 5%, less growth.
This is the follow-up of the Paris Agreement, of course. The Paris Agreement came out with countries make their own pledge as opposed to setting a global pledge. So that was the negotiation that the developing countries did. And Bangladesh was given even more exception because of the vulnerability. So they could come up with something like 5% reduction in emission by 2030 if they do it by themselves, and 15% if there is international support.
So has there been any policy change or any implementation you see at all so far?
Well, there are talks in the country about using renewables, like using wind in some of the areas like Noakhali and other areas. There were a lot of talks about biomass, which has other issues of itself. But in terms of renewables, there are small scale things that many NGOs have done. So I mean, the country, I think there was a national policy. I'm blanking out here on the name. There was a coordinated policy document that came after the INDC. The INDC, the draft I'm looking into in the UN website is 2015. But I think the country has come up with specific targets, emission reduction by 2025.
Okay, Mr. Irfan, I have a quick question for you. Like you said that in Bangladesh, power, transport, and industry are the big contributor to the CO2 emission. What about the agriculture, especially the cattle farming and then the poultry farming? Are those also significant CO2 emitters in the atmosphere? Or because somewhere I heard about that, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that is a very good question, and I know Farooq Zaman has more to say on that, being from that area. But of course, the livestock is one of the major emitters of, if not CO2, maybe other gases like methane is one of the byproduct of cattle farming. But one of the things that the developing countries negotiated on in terms of the adaptation side is, you do pledge without hurting your agriculture and food production without risking. So there will be a more gradual, I don't have the exact wording, but you can be sensitive about those kind of things, which affects people's lives. Your food security and other things.
I have a question.
Sure.
Can I ask you a question, please?
Sure.
Yeah, my question is that because I actually sent that question into chat, that we know the population growth rate currently, and population, even there is stagnant population growth. Do you think that the world can achieve that target to reach pre-industrial level higher than pre-industrial level 1.5 to 2%? Because look at the population growth. Their lifestyle could be changed. Agriculture could be managed. But what about the lifestyle? Do you think the entire world will be vegetarian? Do you think they will stop cultivating their trade on livestock and their processing products and everything? How do you think that the target could be achievable?
No, that's a very good question. Of course, these are so-called anthropogenic emissions. These are because of human activities. So there are reasons to believe that more people will, of course, result in more emissions, because you'll have to feed more mouths and you'll have to produce more materials. So unless we dematerialize or we come up a way of producing goods and materials in a low carbon way, in a more sustainable way, the population increase is going to be a big hit on this. In terms of the projections of the population, now we have to remember one thing. When we talk about this warming, we are actually talking about really long time horizon, 2050, 2100. And most of the demographic projections, Niluapa, they are showing actually population starts to grow 2050, 2060, but they starts coming down, the global population. Do you guys see my screen here by any chance? The model that I'm showing? No?
Yeah, you can see.
So we have a global population projection. I don't know whether I have time. I don't want to take time from this. What I'm trying to say is it's coming down. Yeah, and for African countries, it's still going up for some time because they still have very high fertility rate, like TFR in the range of 5 to 6, which Bangladesh used to have in the 1980s. But for most other countries, the population is coming down. So that is a good thing.
Thank you, Mr. Irfan. We have to move forward for the next speaker. So could you please put your email on the chat box, so if anyone is interested for more questions, so they can contact with you, because you have a very interesting presentation, so people may be interested. So I know you have to leave. You cannot wait until the end. So, okay, so in the meantime, our next speaker is Nigel Hughes. Nigel Hughes. The floor is yours, Mr. Hughes.
Great, thank you. Let me just start the presentation here. Great, I hope everybody can see this. I want to take a very different scale of view on the issue of climate change. I want to talk a little bit about what the ancient history of the Earth says on climate change and how important it is to have a science-based view of the Earth's history in this regard. But I also want to, judging the audience, talk a little bit about how an understanding of Earth's history is a way, really, of engaging children in the Indian subcontinent on this issue, and really on a broader scale of what is a science-based way of viewing the world and the advantages of that. The first thing I would like to point out is that if you saw there on my slide of my affiliation, for the last couple of years, we have become an Earth and Planetary Sciences department. Because one of the most exciting things in the study of the Earth and solar system and beyond that is the discovery of exoplanets and the possibility of viewing the Earth's history not only in the context of our own solar system, but solar systems beyond. And this allows us to ask the question of what is it that's special about our Earth? What is the unique properties of our Earth that distinguish it from other planets, now that we know that planets are actually common around second generation stars in much of our galaxy and likely beyond. So the two particular things are important about our planet that give us the opportunity to be here and even discuss these issues. The first is that our planet is of the right size to have a very active surface of the Earth. And the reason for that is because inside the Earth, isotopic decay is generating heat energy, and that moves the plates of the Earth around and makes the Earth's surface active and dynamic. And also our planet has sufficient size, sufficient mass to hold an atmosphere together. And of course, the activity of the atmosphere is influenced by these internal processes. Volcanoes here, both creating the crust of the Earth, but also the contributing to the atmosphere. And so the planet being of the right size for geological activity to continue and also to contain an atmosphere is very important. And the other thing that, of course, is extremely important is the distance of the Earth from the sun, which allows our atmosphere, and particularly the water in our atmosphere, to be in fluid state, to be in as a liquid. And these two combinations of being the right size of a planet and the right distance from the sun allow our planet to be have at the surface extremely active processes that generate all the things that go on at the surface, the movement of material around, the uplift of mountains, their erosion, the redistribution of materials and energy, which makes our planet highly diverse, not only diverse in terms of the organisms that live on it, but also in terms of the minerals that we find. Our planet is extremely diverse in the physical as well as its biological attributes. And of course, this diversity is not only present today, it's present in the history of our Earth's surface. And we see in the layers of sedimentary rock the history that the Earth has written for itself. And our planet is very unique in that history in comparison to others. So in the next slide, I'm going to show a timescale which shows from the creation of the solar system through to the present, the divisions of the divisions of geological time on our planet versus the Earth. Our planet, the Earth versus Mars. And we don't need to look into the details of any of this, but what you can see here is that just the variety of colors represents the way in which we've been able to divide up the history of the Earth and the history of Mars. And what you can see here, of course, is that on Earth's history, we have many divisions in the relatively recent history, start off at 460 crore years ago, coming towards the recent on the right. The Earth's history, many divisions in recent history because the Earth is so active. Whereas if we look at Mars here, depending on how we divide up the history of the surface of Mars, there are actually more divisions in the early part of that history. And that's, of course, because Mars is a planet that is basically dead at its surface. What's recorded on the surface of Mars today, what we look back at when our probes go there, is the ancient history of Mars, more ancient really than almost any history of the Earth of that age, because our planet is so dynamic and active. And of course, the signature of our planet's surface then is building up these layers of rock, like Dalpatil Lipi, that represent the history of the planet. And here is a very famous place in the history of the science of geology in Scotland, where we see each one of these layers representing events in the ancient history of the Earth stacked on top of one another. You can see that these layers are now vertical, but would originally have represented the sea floor horizontally, and they've obviously been tipped up on their edge and eroded away. And here you can see how later another sequence of rocks that are sloping now were deposited on top of them. Those would have originally been horizontal. And this is a place where it was first realized, at least in Western cultures, that the Earth must have an extremely ancient history, because to accumulate all these layers of rock, then to bury them, to tilt them, to erode them, to deposit these layers of rock that would have originally been horizontal upon them, and then to tilt those and erode those, meant that the Earth has this extremely ancient history. And it's one we can read, and if we apply a scientific way of knowing, we can learn about aspects of Earth history. And I want to mention just very briefly here, of course, there is long periods of Earth history where layers are accumulating on top of one another. And then there are episodes of Earth history where things change really relatively dramatically in a relatively short period of time. So here's a diagram that shows time from 600 million years ago, or really 540 million years ago, towards the present. This is the diversity of animals that were living in the shallow oceans, which is our best geological record. You can see that there's a rise in diversity, and then various events. The colors don't really matter. What I want to show you here is that there are 5 times when diversity dropped very markedly in a relatively short period of time. Now we're dealing with millions of years here, but the question really that I think that's before us is these very sharp drops in diversity, how quickly did diversity actually drop? And what message, what relevance has that for understanding the present biodiversity crisis? The biggest drop of these was the one that happened about 252 million years ago. And you can see that that's a major drop in diversity. And the colors represent different associations of animals. And what you can see is that at this drop, there was a profound change. The community of organisms shown in green here, which were dominant beforehand, became less dominant thereafter. The blue group expanded. It was an episode of really radical change in the Earth's history and in the animals and plants on its living on its surface. And what I wanted really to stress today was our increasing knowledge now of just how quickly those changes took place. You'll know about the Cretaceous Tertiary, which was the time when the dinosaurs died out, and we have good evidence that that was the result of a meteorite impact. The killing mechanism, though, wasn't the meteorite itself, it was the environmental changes it caused. But that was obviously going to be a rapid series of events. But this major killing, the most significant, where it's estimated that over 90% of the animals that were living in the shallow oceans went extinct, we are now beginning to understand just how quickly that extinction took place. And this was an Earth-bound extinction. It wasn't due to extraterrestrial events. It was related to volcanic eruptions and mobilizing a lot of carbon dioxide and sulfur into the atmosphere very quickly. This diagram.
You have 2 minutes.
Oh, 2 minutes. Okay. This is showing some changes in the chemistry. This is showing the diversity, and what you can see is that the diversity drops. And without spending much time on this, we have very good dates from layers of volcanic ash that show that that event happened in less than 200,000 years. We won't go into the details of that, but it could have been much less than 200,000 years. And if we look at other extinctions in the geological record, we can see how rapid those were, even on a finer scale than this. This is less dramatic extinctions, but ones on which we have very fine definition of the time. I don't have time to go into the details of this, but these wobbles here are representing precessional cycles. As you know, the Earth's axis rotates every 26,000 years in a precessional sequence. And what we see in this succession here is changes in the chemistry of the oceans, accompanied by rapid extinctions of organisms that were living, calibrated to a scale of 26,000 years. So we're seeing really rapid changes in the ocean chemistry, accompanied by very significant extinctions, 67% here, 50% here, on a scale of these variations here representing 26,000 years. So this line here is within a human lifetime. And this is a point I really want to stress to you, that the Earth's carbon record was changing here from here to this point. This is 26,000 years. This could be, within a human lifetime. And so this ancient record of kinship is occurring at a rate that is relevant to us today. So just to finish off very briefly, this record is important because it has relevance to understanding what we're doing today. The past has records of ancient natural change, and it's relevant to the human cause of global change that's occurring. But it's also something, the ancient past and the history of the planet is something that we can share with communities who do not necessarily have access to very advanced scientific training. And I just want to conclude by talking very briefly about work that we've done and outreach that we've done in Bengal on this. This was a book that Dipen and I were involved in some years ago about Gachpator. The particular thing about the natural environment's history and its history through time is that it's rural children who are familiar with this. We did some outreach work about this. And I just want to mention a project that we're involved in at the moment, talking about the dramatic history of the Indian subcontinent. And of course, its magnificent journey from Gondwana land northwards to form the Himalaya. And a project that we're working on at the moment, which is to do an animated series telling that history through the interactions of a village girl, Nusrat, and an ancient fossil from the top of Mount Everest. And sorry, I've gone over my time.
Thank you, Nigel. We can take one question for Nigel now. Nigel, will you be here for the entire session? Then we can ask
they have
questions.
to go and come back, but yes.
Okay, so any question, we can take one question right now. Okay, so I think we can move. Any question? I don't think so.
Mr. Farooq Zaman, I just wanted to say that if there was, if not all presenters are present, Nigel has a very interesting 1 minute or 2 minute trailer, that the animation that he's working on right now. And I'm sure that everybody, and it's really nice actually. I'm very, if there's time, maybe he can show that.
Yeah, I could put that in the, I'll put that in the link there. I'll send that in the, oops, sorry, not to Shantanu.
In the chat. Okay. So
everybody.
that
I'll put that in the chat. Yeah.
Okay. So in the meantime, okay. So now we can move to our third speaker, Mrs. Jannat Hussain. So Mrs. Jannat Hussain, could you please introduce yourself for 30 seconds and then move into your presentation? Welcome, Ms. Jannat Hussain.
Thank you very much. I'm Zinat Hussain. I am a PhD researcher working in KU Leuven, Belgium. So I'm connected from Leuven. Very good morning to everyone. Here it's 5 a.m., so very early for me. So I work with coastal Bangladesh, southwest and southern part. And my focus is a gender aspect of climate change dynamics, very specifically, but also connected to the multiple exposure. So I try to share my presentation with you. Yes. Do you see the screen or?
No, we can't see your screen. You have to hit the share screen button. You open your file first.
The file is open.
And then hit the green button where it says share screen. If it is not coming, I can open your file from my side.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm more habituated with the Skype business.
So let me
confused with that.
Let me open from the backup.
While you're doing that, can I ask a question? I actually had one for Nigel. I just didn't want to take more than my share of time.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead for Nigel. Yeah. Let me find that file.
I'm not sure if Nigel is still hearing us. If he is, my question is on the time period. You told us about the KT extinction being the quickest, but in terms of the other extinction, which one is closest in time, just to get a sense of what it might take, because it's pretty depressing to know everything will be gone, but that's one thing. But then the time scale is very important. If we are talking about 20 million years as opposed to 20,000 years, that makes a big difference.
So
I think Nigel is not here right now.
Oh, Nigel is not here? I was asking.
Jinat, can you see my your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, but in that case, you'll have to tell me when I will move for my cursor. Because
yeah, that's a tricky thing.
Yeah.
I think I got it now, the share screen option. So
can you move forward? Like you can move from one slide to another slide, or?
I think I can share from myself now. Do you see my version? No.
No, I cannot see your cursor. So I'll have to move forward. So tell me when to move to the next slide. Okay.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah. So here I'm talking about why the gender dynamics are important in when we talk about climate change, or we talk about sustainable adaptation. So the objective, just a minute, just the whole two things.
Should I move to the next slide?
Yes, please.
Okay, so that's not, okay, so Now you are on the outline slide. Is that okay?
Yes. So so here today, if I say the outline, we can first I will start with the research objective, and then I will go to the theoretical lens that I'm going to apply for the research, and then the methodological direction. I will introduce my case studies, few empirical insights, and just the lesson I learned from my case. So the idea was I wanted to argue that why understanding gender matters is important in understanding climate change adaptation and attaining sustainable adaptation. So if you move forward to the research objective slide, and then I built my research objective into two dynamics. One is the building theoretical understanding of sustainable adaptation through feminist political ecology and multiple exposure lens in coastal social ecological systems. And in empirically, I want to offer a case studies which is based on shrimp cultivation in the southwest coastal part of Bangladesh. And I want to understand the gender matters in why gender matters in that case, to take it as an adaptation scheme or sustainable adaptation scheme. So if I move forward to my theoretical and conceptual lens very quickly, because I'm not going to the details about it, in my theoretical understanding, I want to put climate change as not as an isolated component, but within multiple exposures. So by multiple exposures, what I mean that the climate change impact doesn't come as only one component, but with the surrounded social ecological dynamics. And here, because I'm working in the coastal part, the coastal social ecological dynamics. So when you talk about adaptation, we must talk about these whole exposures interacted with climate change. And my argument here is, if we talk about sustainable adaptation, then we have to talk also about the gender aspect, because this multiple exposure, if we go to the next slide, the multiple exposure interacts with gender aspect a lot. I'm going to the details when I talk about my empirical case. So I moved to the research method. My research method was qualitative, and I used different qualitative tools as I see. So in the semi-structured interview, participant observation, focus group discussion, I also take a few online interviews, and I also used maps, photographs, and videos to analyze my case. So it's an integrated case study approach in qualitative study. Next slide, this is my case study area, which is in Shamnagar, Satkhira district, where I had my first field exposure, and I followed the dynamics from this particular context to understand the case study I'm investigating. So as I said, my case is about shrimp cultivation in Sundarban Delta. I know that many of you maybe are familiar with these dynamics, but I can also tell you a bit in my coming slides. But before I go to the shrimp cultivation, as I talked already about the multiple exposures, so if I go to the next slide, the social ecological challenges of Southwest coastal region, I try to identify a few biophysical exposures and social exposures. So we know that in that particular area, we have the climate change stressors, salinity level high, sea level rise. There's a nice dynamics with the Sundarban Delta, with the sea level, all these interactions. So, and also this area, and normally the southern coastal part of whole Bangladesh is interrupted by several natural calamities and disaster, like Cyclone Aila happened in 2009, Cyclone Cedar, which happened in 2007, which were more significant. And we all know that recently also we continued with the flood. If I move to the social exposures to the next slide, slide number 9. we have shrimp cultivation as a social exposure. I introduced shrimp cultivation, but apart from that, there are a few other social political indicators that impacted the whole interaction between human and environment on that particular area a lot. For example, the water distribution conflict with India that has been a long history, polarization. We know that there are millions of, thousands of polder built on that particular area to save the community from the over flooding, but that has different impacts. So it's not my intention of today's presentation. I'm not going to tell about that. And then we also see that as a result of industrialization on that particular area, there are several coal and power plants that were establishing in that area. There, as an impact, there is a livelihood change and internal external migration. We noticed that digitalization also has an impact on that particular part of the. So if I move to slide number 10, we see a few pictures, few maps from that particular case. We see in slide number 11, the digesters in several last few digesters impact. Now I come to my case, shrimp cultivation. So we all know that the shrimp farming in Bangladesh, it has an economic boom. It has an economic grown-up history. It started in 80s, and then it was getting one of the most important export earning component component in Bangladesh, and among the fisheries product, it took the almost highest number of export earning. And then it has been said by the economists that it has contributed to reduce poverty, employment generation, community progress, and many other positive impact has been identified. Then we saw that shrimp cultivation, because southwest coastal part is deeply salinity influenced, so this shrimp cultivation has been taken as an adaptation mechanism for climate for that particular area. If you look at slide number 13, and then we saw that this was part of the structural adjustment program by the government, and still now it has been continuing with the government and NGOs to promote it as an adaptation mechanism in that particular area. So linking to that, I identified few impact from the lens of multiple exposures based on this case. We saw that because of the shrimp cultivation, there's a lot of land grabbing issues on that particular area. Mostly the rich people or the rich farmers are taking the land from the poor farmer, because the poor farmer or the small scale farmer, they cannot really produce something because of the salinity. And when you have saline water around you with the shrimp farming, your land is distracted, so you cannot really cultivate. So they have to give up the land to the richer or the big land owners. So there is a class dynamics there, because the rich and poor, there's getting a distinction between them. And then the home-based agriculture that's mostly oriented by the female at that particular area, it has been demolished because of the salinity, and then that leads to the cut down of the labor from the agriculture, and many people migrate to the capital. Many Hindu community migrated to India. Many migrated to the nearby cities. So there's a livelihood change. Also, there's an alternative option of livelihood, which is forest dependency. That means Sundarban is very close, so people started depending on forest and doing forestry stuff like collecting honey, collecting fish, getting fish or woods or other source of livelihood from the forest. And then there's a pressure on the forest. Forest animals like tigers and other animals are getting less and less food, because most of them consumed by the by the people, and because of these people don't know about the forest techniques, there are a lot of tiger attack on that particular area, and many people died. And tiger also comes out to the community to get food, and there are several attacks with
You
that.
have
So
2 minutes,
and yes, thank you. And then if I talk about the female-headed household on that area, because of the loss of many people, many farmers or many forestry in the tiger, many people got widow on that area. So the single-headed household or the female-headed households are increasing. On the other hand, when men are migrating to urban areas, then again women are left behind, and they have to run their families. So the female-headed household apparently are increasing on that particular area. And also because of this migration change and all this aspect, many people are depending on day laborer, and then again in day laborer or the whole idea of shrimp cultivation, we find there's a strong gender division of labor. Women are assigned to particular work, men are assigned to particular work. Women are mostly assigned to the low paid work, while men are doing relatively higher paid work. Because I come back to the left again, because of the home-based agriculture is diminishing again, there is a scarcity of food in household, and women normally in Bengali culture, we know that women are getting less and less food to serve the rest of the family. So here I analyze my case from intersectionality and feminist political ecology lens, more or less what I talked before. I see the adaptation scheme, which is assigned to shrimp cultivation, turned as maladaptation to the poorer people normally, and there's a big class dynamics in that particular area. If you look at slide 15, I try to identify a few controversial situations in the family. There are many religious dynamics, communal conflict among Hindus and Muslim, and many Hindu community are migrating also to India because it's very close. And there's a strong gender division of labor, and also there's behind the story that is our gender discriminatory land tenure and common resource management, what never sometimes doesn't let women to work in the forest or work in the land as equal to as men. So what lesson we learn from the case and more from a theoretical understanding, if I move to slide number 16, the southwest coastal part area has several significant social ecological characteristics, including climate change as a threat. So climate change is not an isolated component for that particular area. This territory comprises several social, political, cultural exposures that makes the climate change threat bigger. There are multiple exposures which are strongly governed by gender regimes, mostly connected to land, labor, and resource. When we talk about adaptation, we need to talk about geopolitical and historical mapping of the particular area, and very context spacing, multi-layered power dynamics, which is connected with this gender regime. If we cannot tell that or cannot consider that may bring maladaptation to certain community, like for shrimp cultivation is the poor and lower class people, and also for the marginal women. And finally, I want to argue that sustainable adaptation, which is a buzzword now, cannot be achieved through considering a strong gender and equity consideration. That's all from me. Thank you very much. If you have any question, feel free to ask. I'm sorry for the interruption with my Zoom.
No problem. So
Zoom
thank you,
sharing.
Gina.
I hope it's okay. You get all the slides. Thanks, Mr. Farooq Zaman, for helping.
So thank you, Jinat. We can save the question for the time's sake. We can save the question at the end of the presentation.
No problem. Thank you.
Is there anyone? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so can we move to our next speaker, Mr. Jahidul Islam? Mr. Jahid, are you there? Is Mr. Jahid there? If not, can we move to the next speaker, Ms. Nushat Fatima? Can you hear me?
Sir, she is not here, I think.
What about Jahidul Islam?
She's also not here, sir.
Okay, so two speakers, these were the last two speakers. So if we don't have any speakers present here, so we can move to our discussion. So any questions or anything? So let me see. Yes, I see Nigel Hughes is here, and also, so yeah, so we got three good talks, and those were very good discussion. So is Mr. Irfan still here?
I'm here.
Okay, so Mr. Irfan is here. Is Mr. Nigel here? Maybe not.
He looks here.
He looks here. His microphone is off, so maybe he's talking, but we can hear you. Okay, so, and then Jinat is here. So if anyone would like to ask any question, the floor is here. So we have about 10 minutes for the question and answer, any kinds of discussion. Feel free to ask question.
I don't want to be the only one asking questions today.
Yeah.
No, I had a question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. I had a question for Jinat. I have to first admit that I was writing a recommendation and I was doing stuff at the same time, so I couldn't pay a lot of attention, but it sounded like a very important issue with a very vulnerable group, the coastal areas. If you could actually repeat the recommendations for us that came at the end. So I saw a conclusion and recommendation. So that's something I would like to have as my takeaway. Yeah.
The recommendation from my analytical analysis, you mean?
Right, yeah.
My argument or recommendation is maybe a big thing for such a small scholar like me, but maybe my argument is here that when we talk about adaptation or when we prescribe some adaptation to the coastal community, can be by government or can be by NGOs, we also need to understand the context very well. As I recommended in my last slide about the geopolitical history, the context mapping, which is very important. Though Bangladesh is a small country, but with a big population, and we could see different diversity among different community, different religion, different class dynamics. When we talk about gender, I know that there are a lot of discussion about gender and climate change adaptation, but gender is mostly centered as men and women in the context of Bangladesh policy, gender adaptation policy, which is somehow accurate, but I think now it's a high time to also consider the class aspect or the hierarchy age aspect within women or within men, or men versus women, or Hindu versus Muslim, or rich versus poor. So these intersectional dynamics, what I wanted to explain, I think when we talk about adaptation, and especially when we talk about sustainable adaptation, which is a buzzword now, we need to consider all these aspects to give a really sustainable and locally oriented or locally embedded policy for the poor people. So in that case of shrimp cultivation, what happened, because it is getting a lot of profit, we see a lot from the economical aspect that it's booming, it's a rising economy, which is good for the country's economy, but we see the people living there for many it's profitable, who could make a business out of it, like the large scale farmers or the landowners. And you may know that there are many big people, I mean very renowned people are also involved in the shrimp farming, like our cricket captain, previous cricket captain Sakib Al Hassan. So there are many big people, big celebrities are also involved in that shrimp farming cultivation. But what happened to the lower, small scale farmers? What happened to the women who had homestead farming for growing vegetables just to have their everyday need? What happened to the lower caste community people who don't get any land anymore? So these all aspects, I think it's very much needed to consider when we give an adaptation scheme to ensure the sustainability, especially for that particular area where the ecology is so fragile with the salinity, climate change, natural disaster, and many other complex social and political dynamics.
So am I hearing it right that it's not just the gender, it's the context of class and the religion which needs to be taken into account, and the local people need to be involved, right, in this policy making? Okay.
Yes, that's what my argument. I mean, while we don't talk only about men and women when we talk about gender, but also the micro dynamics, the micro interaction within this women group or men versus women group, all this micro power aspect, I think those are very important to take into consideration.
Thank you, Gina. Gina, I have a quick question. Like, I never visited that part of Bangladesh, but I heard like a lot of agricultural land, those are used for vegetables or rice or with some traditional agriculture. Those are now transforming into the shrimp farming. Are the landowner willingly transferring or selling their land for shrimp production when they actually inundated their field with the salt water, or there are some other kinds of like the pressure or something is on those like the marginal farmers to give the lands for shrimp? Do you have any insight for those kinds of situations?
Thanks, Mr. Farooq Zaman. Very relevant question, actually. If I go to the details about the land, I already talked about the land grabbing cost from this shrimp farming. I would say both, because depending on how large your farming was, because the small scale farmer, for example, I'm a small scale farmer, I have a small land and surrounded by a large ranged farming or farmer or large landowner, and that large owner decided to convert this agriculture farm to shrimp farming. Then what happened, he's blocking the water, so the salinity also infected on my small land. And actually, indirectly or directly, sometimes it's forcefully, sometimes it's not, but without even force, that small scale farmer being very small land, I have to give up my land to the large farmer. There's no alternative. So there are a lot of conflict with these land grabbing things, that it has been told by the small scale farmer, their land has been taken by the big fish. I mean, the big farmers or landowners, or someone come from Dhaka or very big industrialists who want to buy a big amount of land. And even though this small farmer doesn't consider to give the land or to sell the land or to lease the land to the big landowner, he has to do it because he cannot anymore cultivate in this small farmer because of the salinity issue. Although we know that there are different NGOs are working to salinity gives different seeds and different techniques to salinity tolerant rice and other vegetables. But I have an understanding that is also very much gendered, because when they give the seeds to the farmer, they don't consider the women farmer as well, because farmer in Bangladesh is considered as a very masculine aspect. When we see different agricultural programming also in Bangladesh television or some other satellite channel, you see the farmer are mostly men, but the farming has been traditionally and from ancient time, it has been shared by women. The post-harvesting things, the seedings has been done by women. And so as in that particular region, women are contributing a lot. But the policies when they're making, they don't consider women as a farmer as well. So it has been again an issue.
Thank you, Gina. Actually, the farming begins with the female in the me time. So I see that Nigel is
Yes.
here. So Nigel, okay, so any question for Nigel? Also, you would like to show the 1 minute animation? Can you
Yes.
show it from your side? We would like to see it.
I can, yes. Let me see. I'm not very good at this. Can I now? Let me see whether I can share the screen.
Yeah, since we have about 5-6 more minutes, so we can just.
Okay, yeah. So so let me just say a few words about this. To link back to what I was saying before, of course, you know, one of our key missions is to interest the communities at large in the history of the Indian subcontinent and what science says about that. Of course, this is a big issue of different ways of knowing and approaching, have different stories about how the world has come to be the way it is. But one of the things that's really important about the Indian subcontinent is that of all regions of the earth, it has perhaps the most exciting geological history of the Indian subcontinent, moving from this collection of continents together, the southern continents in Gondwana, moving northwards and eventually colliding with Asia to form the Himalaya. And so that's a history that every citizen of the subcontinent can be proud of. So what we would like to do is to do an animated series telling that history. When we did the Monisha Patore Bon story, which was about Gach Pator, about fossilized wood, we found that the language requirements of reading the book, were challenging, and so an animated series would be a fun thing to be able to do, because the broad scale history of India's movement, the Indian subcontinent's movement, is something that can be understood without knowing the details of the structure of the atom or whatever. Something that is large in scale, but relatively easy to convey. So what I'm going to try and do is show you then the little teaser, as it's called, for the animated series. So I and friends, Shekhar Mukherjee, who's the director of the National Institute of Design in Vijayawada, and Trisha Banerjee, who's a very talented animator, are proposing to do a series that we could put on YouTube and make available freely, called in English, The Ocean on Top of Our Mountain. And the story is really about the top of Everest, the top of Sagarmatha, which is the rocks that form the top of Everest were once the bottom of an ancient tropical ocean. And in that ocean lived various animals. And then, of course, through the history of the movement of India northwards, there's a whole series of other exciting animals, such as dinosaurs. So let's see if we can play this.
The top of the Sagarmatha wasn't always a high mountain. Long, long ago, it was the bottom of an ancient ocean. And when a big storm came, the seafloor was flooded. Nusha, we want to meet someone special who has been in this place far longer than anyone else. Really? It doesn't look very special to me. You think that these mountains have always been here, don't you, Nushra? Of course, they have. The Earth story is much longer than the story of all the people who have ever lived on it.
Sorry, Jinath, could you please read the chat box? There is a comment for Michael Blower for you. Could you please read the chat box?
Yes, I'm reading that now. Thank you.
Those who lived in India during that epic voyage. It's the story of our subcontinent's past, which belongs to each one of us. Get ready for Putishiti and Mishra in the ocean on the top of our mountain to take you on to the true adventure of 100 crore lifetimes.
Thank you, Nigel. It was very interesting.
Yes. Well, thank you. Yes. Sorry. Yes. So, well, I should mention that we want to produce versions in Hindi, Urdu, and in Bengali.
Thank you. And we have to wrap up. So before going to wrap up, I would like to request Mr. Ataur Rahman if you have anything to say. And also like to thank
Mr. Chair. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Actually, I wanted to say something because I have to just switch to another program at 10:30. So I thank all the presenters and I thank Nigel for his sharing his animation. And I look forward to see the entire movie if possible in the future. And the presentation from Jinath was interesting. Of course, it was like because of the time, because as you mentioned, it's there are different dynamics there. It's not only a gender or it's not only men and women issue, especially the Rampal issue and the areas, you know, the livelihood threatened. So there are many things to be discussed. So I thank all the presenters, and from my side, best wishes to you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ataur Rahman. And Shantanu Vishwa Shubho, do you have any comments or anything to say before we wrap up?
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so that's all. And thanks all the participants and attendees. I see some very nice person and very talented person here. So I don't want to read all the name, but thank you all for being with us, and thanks all the speakers and presenters, and thanks for good, nice questions also. So have a nice evening. I'd rather say afternoon in Bangladesh. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Satman,